There's a story that I was really fascinated when I read the sign up for it, because I thought to myself, this one needs to be told, especially in this day and age, because it's very relevant to what we call ourselves, which is third culture kids. And as third culture kids, it is always different for us to go and live in a country that's not ours and then try and integrate both cultures to come up with that third one. So, without spoiling too much, I'd like to introduce Miss Imrana. Imrana's from Detroit. She's going to be telling us a story of how, as an Indian woman, Pakistani-Indian, Desi, let's call it Desi for now, she had to get married at a very early age in the West. Imrana, thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaid. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I really appreciate this, and I really appreciate this platform being restarted. Definitely need more of these events. So as I am first generation Pakistani-American. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan in the hood. I didn't grow up in a suburb where things are like very picket fencey. And when you always get asked in life, the older you get, like what's the one moment in your life you could change? So my parents moved to Detroit in the 70s, and they took the culture they grew up with. They didn't take a new culture. They didn't know how the culture was evolving back in Pakistan. So they kept the culture that was with them. And that's how they raised us. Like, we're inner city kids, but at the same time, I had to wear shalwar kameez to school every day. I couldn't, I didn't have to wear a dupatta, but at least I had to be covered head to toe. And my family was so strict that one time my mom decided, you know what, my daughter should be able to wear jeans. And she decided that, I'm going to take my girl shopping. And when we went, my aunt, who is, niqabi, she wears like the whole burqa, she would say, astaghfirullah, it's haram, she's imitating a man. Why are you letting her wear these jeans? And my mom would feel so embarrassed that she's like, no, we're just going to return them. And because of this, I also developed body issues. I didn't know what size I was in Western culture because shalwar kameezes are so baggy, you never realize that you're plumping up or slimming down. They just cover you. When I was in the 8th grade, my mom's mom, my nani, she developed a tumor in her gallstone. And needless to say, she was on bed rest because it ruptured. And I was very attached to her. She's the type of grandmother, like when you would see her, she'd be wearing a nice big fur coat and you could just like cuddle up in her like a little cat. And I was very attached to her to the point where when she passed away, everybody was worried, like, oh my God, Imrana's gonna fall in depression. We need to do something about this. And the answer for that was, let's get her married. I was in 8th grade, I was 13. And it was just, my mom sat me down and I started, high school, and she was just like, Beta, why? Why don't you want to get married? I was like, Mom, I'm only in 9th grade now. Like, why do I want to get married? She's like, is there somebody else? And ladies, if you know, this is the age where you start developing a crush, you start realizing the kind of guys you might like, what you might be attracted to. I was such a tomboy, I was oblivious to those things. And my parents had trained me so much to the point where when I saw another brown guy or another Muslim guy, I'm like, he's a potential. I shouldn't look at him that way because he's a potential. Because my mom and dad were always like, you must marry Muslim, you must marry Desi. And in an inner city Detroit, that's hard to find. Like, you will find a Muslim, but he won't be Desi. He'll be, a black guy or African American. I mean, we didn't have white kids in our school, and the ones that were there, they were the tokens, So when my grandmother died, and I was like going on to 10th grade, my mom just had a talk with me. She sat me down. She's like, "Is there somebody else? Do you have somebody else in mind for you?" And I was just like, "Mom, why would I have somebody else?" And she did the one thing that all our mothers do at a certain age, which was sit me down and say, "Mothers are like friends. Talk to me like I'm your best friend." I was just like, "Mom, are you serious?" And I was like, "Okay, what do you want to know?" And she's like, "Is there somebody at school you like?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of do. I have a crush on somebody." She's like, "Oh, what is he like? Where is he from?" I was like, "Well, he grew up in Detroit also. and he's Bangladeshi. And then immediately, she's like, Bangladeshi? Astaghfirullah, they're traitors. Again, the 70s was just very reminiscent of in her. And I didn't know what she meant by that because I didn't study South Asian history at that point. And I was just like, Mom, he doesn't even know I exist. Like, I follow him around like a little puppy. And she's like, what? No, how could this be? Like, you know, it takes 2 hands to clap. With 1 hand, you're just hitting flies. And she used that as justification to say, we are getting you married now. You are going on the wrong path. And I was just like, Mom, like, I don't. And then coincidentally, everything was piling up to like, hey, we have a guy for you. He's amazing. He's only 2 years older than you. I was like, what 15, 17-year-old wants to marry a girl at this age? And I realized it was my cousin. So my parents, like, were very engaged. They're like, you know what, but it's your choice still. And, you know, we will follow the Islamic path. We will give you a choice. And I was like, what are my choices? First talk to your cousin, and then we'll see about choices. And I talked to him, like he didn't have much to say on the phone. I speak broken Urdu. He was like, I don't know what to say. He was so shy. He gave the phone to his mother. And he's like, you take care of it. And I was like, what? I was so offended on the other end that, okay, none of the guys in my school are gonna like me. And now my own guy that wants to marry me doesn't like me. So the bar was set so high or low. And I just told my mom, like, he's not interested in marrying me. She's like, well, the older brother already said no to you, so it's him. And his mom said, like, yes, it's him. I never grew up with this cousin, so I never had that feeling that he's like a brother, because the cousins that I grew up with were like brothers to me. But this one was a potential because we never saw each other much. I never went back to Pakistan as much. And after 13 years, when I do go back to Pakistan, it's to get married. So my parents like made sure that I got to see his picture. And my mom was so excited the day the envelope came, and it was one of those beady envelopes with like the red and blue with the light blue background and like all these foreign stamps on it. And like she opens it and she's like, oh my God, mashallah, he looks so good. And I was just excited a little. I'm like, okay, if my mom approves, he must be. And I look at his picture, and it's just like his whole left side was slouched, his face was lopping. He had this thick mustache for a 17-year-old, and I was like, are we sure he's 17? And my mom's like, everybody says he looks like a prince, but what is Imrana gonna look like next to him? I was just like, what? I was like, this looks like a prince? He looks like a robber. You know, he didn't, and then the next picture is a picture of him with his 2 brothers. And I was just like, couldn't the other one have said yes? Like, and my mom's like, astaghfirullah, we picked this one for you. That's it, done. And I was just like, okay. So the next few months as I started 11th grade, it was all about grooming me to be a wife. My dad had already done that. Being an obedient daughter, I was very well trained on every time my dad would walk home, I'd help him, you know, dismantle his shoes. I'd serve a tray of food to my dad, make sure he had water. That was just the way my parents taught me to be obedient. And I didn't say no to them or make a fuss out of it because those concepts of, hey, you can call the police on your parents were still new. And it was to the point where when you call the police, your parents will disown you anyway, but also beat the crap out of you. So I went along with it because I was like, you know what, this is making my parents happy. I'm completing a sunnah. I'm gonna make sure, you know, I have that space in Jannah because that's how I was conditioned. My wedding was not in the US because there are laws. So my parents made sure that in the state of Michigan, where I'm from, you are allowed to get married at 16 with parental consent. We went to Pakistan that winter because all weddings in South Asian culture happen in December season. So when I went there, he picked me up from the airport with the rest of my relatives. And when I finally looked at him, I'm like, oh, he's not bad. You know, he was like 6 foot, had really big dimples. The mustache was okay, like I couldn't do much about it. But he was like broad, like naturally, I was like, okay, maybe my parents know best what's good for me. I mean, little did I know, I was just being like maybe a horny 14-year-old, you know, just being like, he's so hot. But when I got home, like I took a quick nap and my little brother and sister were with me. My little brother's like at the door talking to somebody. I was like, who are you talking to? Like, just go to sleep. we had this long 16-hour flight, and he's just like, oh, it's your future husband, ha 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 ha. And like, I open the door, and he's like sitting there on the stairs, just hanging out with my little brother, like entertaining like an 11-year-old. And I was just like looking at him, and I was just like, how are you? And he's just like, and he shied away so bad that he ran off like a girl. Needless to say, the wedding took place at like my aunt and uncle, they rented out half of the street so they could put up a tent. And to me, this was so new because I never really envisioned what my wedding could look like. I never had an expectation that I'm gonna get dressed up in like a certain attire, except the one thing I knew was my outfit had to be red. But unfortunately, the outfit they made for me, it was red, but it was like pants and a shirt, whereas I wanted the traditional long dress with like gold embroidery. And my great aunt felt so bad that it wasn't the type of outfit I wanted. She took me out the night before, and she's like, listen, it's your wedding, it only happens once. I was like, yeah. She's like, we're gonna get you a dress. I was like, so excited. But then when we got to the dress shop, my aunt started dictating the type of dress I can buy. So I just gave in, I'm like, you know what, it's okay, I can make an older person feel good about themselves. And I told my aunt, like, you know, whatever you pick. So she gave me 3 options. But one was like this really hot pink outfit with like silver and multicolor pink on it. And it was like shiny, and I was just like, oh no, it looks kind of weird. Like, and she's like, that's your outfit. I was like, what? She was paying for it. I couldn't argue with her. We were staying at her house. I couldn't say anything to offend her because I was like, my mom was like, you have to be happy about everything that's happening. And at that time, the wedding was a little simple. We got married, and I was just like, this is it, you know, this is my husband. He was actively participating in everything. And the nice thing was we had this really long conversation at night after the ceremony and everything was done. People let us sit alone and talk. And he finally started talking. He started talking about what he expected out of life, what he's looking to do. I was like, wow, this is like a pretty mature guy. Half the words I couldn't understand to him. And then he says, you know what? You must have been really bad in the US for your parents to get you married so young. And I just looked at him like, what? I was like, why would I be bad? And he's like, did you ever interact with guys? And I was like, well, yeah, I have school friends, you know? And he's like, was there anything crazy you ever did in your life? Did a guy ever touch you the wrong way? And it's like, it's kind of weird, like you're asking all this. We're married now, it's done. Like, my past is in the past, I never did any of these things. And he was just so shocked that my parents raised us to be so conservative, living in the US. Whereas he was like modernizing because he was growing up with the culture back home. So he saw guys and girls would meet up, guys and girls would go on dates. Whereas for me, it's like if my dad ever found out I was on a date, he'd just be like, what the fuck, you know? And it was also like one of those things where I participated in the science club. And now as a South Asian, as a Desi kid, your parents would be proud, like, oh, my kid wants to do math and science. My parents were like, oh, now we have to pick you up after school, like 2 hours after your school is done. So everything I did, I just felt like was a burden, you know? And I told my husband at the time, I said, you know, there's one thing that I do regret. When I was in 3rd grade, this kid, ginger kid, like we were both obviously short, and he came up to me and the ginger kid was just like, out of nowhere, like we were just playing tag, and instead of tagging me, he just grabs me and gives me a little kiss. I told him, you know what I did to that kid? I jumped on him and I beat the crap out of him. Because the only thing in my mind was, oh my God, if my dad finds out, I'm gonna be dead. Like a boy kissed me. How good is it me? And I was like, this is the age where you're going like, boys, ew, cooties. And I told him this, and he just couldn't believe. Like, Saad couldn't believe that this is the type of girl I'm marrying. She's been like so like pious. I'm like, no, I've been so obedient. So needless to say, that night, he decided to come in for the move because we were alone, the lights were right. We're sitting on this little mattress. For some reason, there was a mattress in the kitchen where we were talking. And he just like comes in, and all of a sudden like he misses and he just goes in, and it's like Pac-Man kissing my face. You know, he's after the pellet, but he just grabbed the whole jaw. And I was just like, in my head, I'm like, God, I wish I could remember that ginger kid's name. Because that kiss was my true first kiss, and this was just like somebody biting my face off. So at the age of 16, I sponsored somebody. I got somebody a green card. I didn't make any money, but I sponsored him. And it was interesting to learn a lot about how do you file these paperwork and how do you like say what you do for a living. And in my occupation, I had to write student. And then they're like getting some affidavits from my mom and dad to show they had enough money to support him in case he doesn't have a job. And the whole idea that they had was, he's 18, you're 16, you guys can go to school together. I was ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have a prom date. Like I can do those American cultural things that I couldn't do because I can't have a man. But now I have a man. Now I can go on my prom date. I can go around the city and go on dates with a guy. And he's not old. At that time, there was like a trend in our Pakistani community where the girls were getting married, but the guys were 10 years older than them. So I was so thankful that my guy is only 2 years older than me. We're gonna go to college together. It's like we'll be high school sweethearts. We're gonna like just hold hands and just go at it. You know, one time he gave me like passion marks or hickeys, whatever you prefer, and they were on my face. We're getting off the bus and this girl shouts out like, oh my God, look at her. She's like all red and it's not those kind of red. And I was just like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing. I didn't know how to put on makeup, so there was no foundation for me to cover up at that time. So Saad was very like diligent. He was like, we're gonna go to school, I'm gonna do my degree, but I need to work. When he came to the US, the first thing he wanted to do was work, and I was like, why do you wanna work? My parents worked their butt off. My mom worked 3 jobs as an ECG technician. My dad was a parking lot attendant. He used to drive a taxi. So I've seen my family struggle, and I told him, listen, we don't need a life of struggle. You don't need to work in a factory right now. You have a brain. Let's harvest that. Let's both go to school. Let's make sure we get our education done, and we can find a job. And he was just like, no, I'm the man. He came up with that upbringing. I'm like, I didn't expect that because he was so forward in other things. He's like, I'm the man in this relationship. I have to take care of you. It is my obligation. I'm like, yeah, but we're kids. I have to finish high school. You're gonna start college. And needless to say, we started having issues around this whole topic of education because my saving grace to marrying him was, we're gonna be in school together. He's gonna get his degree. I will not have to struggle the way my parents struggled to get 5 kids fed. And he just was like, no, I have to do this, I started resenting him. He got a job in a factory because my aunt and uncle convinced him, Beta, you don't need to go to school. Work in the factory, you'll make like, $10 an hour. And I just looked at him like, that's what you want for yourself? You want to be an accountant. Why would you do that? So I'm like, I want to do this. I need to make money. I need to send money back home. It's like, why do you have to send money back home? Your mom is being supported by everybody in our family because she's a widower. You don't have to worry about this. And he just didn't want to deal with it. He's like, no, you don't know anything. You're a kid. It's like, look who's talking. We're both kids. And then I started going to college. I started socializing. I was part of the Pakistani Student Association. I joined the Muslim Student Association. I just started, and he just couldn't handle that. Why are you out so late? Why are you staying in the library? Why are you doing this? Like, come home and study. You should start cooking for me. You should do this. And it's just, the older we started getting, instead of growing together, we were just growing apart. And I couldn't take it. I was just like, listen, you're a kid, I'm a kid, we're growing up. But this isn't what I wanted for us. And you're not telling me what you wanted for us. And you're showing me in such an inappropriate way. He never raised his hand on me. One time though, we both had one of our little fights, and my mom kind of instigated it. He was very anti my mom. And my mom said something to him, and all he did was like turn around and just threw the TV remote control. And instead of my mom catching it, it hit me on the head, and I started bleeding. So the next day when I was in school, everybody, for some reason, it was one of those days where everybody's like patting my head. And I was just like, ouch. And they're like, what's going on? I was like, oh, nothing. We had a little argument. And they're like, he hit you. You need to report him. I was like, no, it was an accident. It was, because he was the nicest guy outside of this argument. I'm not condoning domestic violence. I know it sounds like it, but he really didn't mean to do it at that time. And the next day he apologized. He's like, listen, I think we need to take a break. Let's just take a breather. you focus on your school stuff. I'm gonna focus on working, making money. And it was all good until every time I had to go somewhere and I socialized and I wanted him to come with me. I was like, listen, you're my husband. You should come with me. You should meet some of the people I'm meeting. And he would just be like, no, I don't want to. Now, being Pakistani, he was a very big cricket fan, you know? There were cricket matches that the guys would organize, and he started going to these cricket matches. Everybody knew me because I was on the board for some of these organizations. And when he would go to those cricket matches, we would have fights, because he'd come back and he'd be like, you know what? I don't want to go anymore. I was like, why? He's like, because when I go there, everybody says, oh, this is Imrana's husband. And I'm like, but you are my husband. His logic was he wanted to be his own man, and he couldn't because everybody recognized him as my husband. And instead of saying like, yes, I'm her husband, I'm here to like, you know, Imrana's my wife and stuff, she goes to your school, he would just be so offended that they don't just say like, oh, this guy's name is Saad. Like, Saad's here, Saad does this, Saad does that. No, it was like, everything was like, Imrana this, Imrana that. Oh, and he couldn't tolerate that. He left me alone and went to Pakistan, and I was so offended at that. He went for a couple of months, and it was the first trip that he took back home after we got married. So to me, it was like, hey, we should go back together as a couple. I want to experience what it's like to be with my mother-in-law one-on-one. I want to experience that whole South Asian, you know, hospitality that I keep hearing about. And he's like, why do you want to go back? You don't even like my mom. I was like, she's my aunt. Why wouldn't I like her? He's like, no, I don't want to take you. And then he calls like a little kid amateurishly saying like, Imrana, guess what? I'm like, what? He's like, I booked my ticket for Pakistan. I'm going, you're not, ha ha ha. I just started bawling. I gave the phone to my mom and I'm like, this is the man you picked for me. And one thing led to another. He didn't want to give up working in a factory. He didn't even want to go to school. His schooling was so bad that I was pissed for him as if I was his mother. He failed aerobics. That's the one class you can go to and all you have to do is show up. You don't even have to participate. You just show up just to get marked present. And because of that, he lost his financial aid. And that pissed me off because, you know, my parents weren't well off. I had to struggle. I had to take grants and loans to go through school. And he had free money for schooling, and he failed aerobics. Like, I was embarrassed. How could you fail aerobics? If it was like accounting, math, fine. But you failed aerobics and you lost your financial aid money now. Like, so when he went to Pakistan and he came back, he didn't consult me. He didn't say, Imrana, guess what? I got us an apartment. It's in a neighborhood you'll like. He just said, like, guess what? I got an apartment. Now you have to move in with me. I was like, okay, where's the apartment? It's like, oh, it's all the way in like this area called Brownstown. Ironically, a lot of brown people live there. But he just was like, we're gonna live there. I was like, yeah, but my commute's gonna be an hour to get to work. And he's like, oh, it doesn't matter, don't worry, it's a really nice apartment. And guess what, our aunt can come over every time. I was like, what? I don't wanna come over with my aunt. Like my aunt, this is my religious aunt. She would come over and talk to him and give him lectures and dars and khutbahs and, you know, convince him of the way to do things with his wife. And one time when I finally decided to move in with him, I was like, it's my last year in college. I just want a clean slate. So I go over and I take all my stuff and my aunt comes in. He made sure that she can come in that evening. And I was just like, why did you do this? It's supposed to be our first night alone. Why are you bringing our aunt here? He's like, because she wants to talk to you. She wants to tell you that you're doing the wrong. I'm like, I don't want to talk to her right now. Like, I love her, but right now is not one of those days I want to talk to her. So when my aunt came, she started lecturing me. She started giving me a one-on-one khutbah, saying, listen, Islamically, we have to do this. You know, you don't need school anymore. Just stop school. Start having kids now. You know, it's your age. You're going to get older. And I just looked at him, looking at him, and I'm just like, I wanted him to say something. He was looking all dopey-eyed, as if like my aunt was preaching the best sermon of her life to me. And I just look at him like, are you okay with this? And he's like, yes, absolutely. You know, you don't have to go to school anymore. I make enough in the factory. We could just, and I told him, like, I don't envision me being the wife of a factory worker. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I envisioned. That's not why we got married early, you know? And Then my aunt continued because she couldn't handle the fact I was like saying no. And I was trying not to be disrespectful to her. And out of the blue, she goes like, listen, write it, I will write it in blood. Your husband will never finish his degree. And that's the day I lost respect for him. I was like, Saad, how could you let her say that? He's like, it doesn't matter what she says. I'm like, no, but you didn't even stand up for yourself. You couldn't stand up for me, but you didn't even stand up for yourself. So that tells me the kind of life that you want to live. And then after that, we took a little break again. I finished my college, I finished my undergrad degree, because I didn't want any distractions. So I was like, let me pile through school. And when I finally decided to make things right between them, my cousin comes to me and says, like, guess what? Baji, like, you know, your husband's been out and about in the factory. I was like, okay, that's fine. I mean, he should be out and about. And he goes like, no, but there's a certain group of friends. So since I had moved out, my husband had gotten a roommate. He had decided that this roommate was the most amazing guy in the world for him. This roommate decided to start bringing over girls. Ladies, you know how it is when your husband starts seeing other girls, you know. And then I confronted my husband because he wanted to rekindle. He's like, my aunt's in town. She wants to talk to you. So I was like, okay, come over. My dad and mom are home too. And my parents are talking. And meanwhile, he takes me in the back room and he says like, so I think you've heard I've been taking a lot of road trips and stuff. I was like, yeah, and you got a roommate, I heard. And he just goes like, yeah, you know, it's been really, really interesting. I've been learning a lot. I've been like expanding my horizon. And I was so happy to hear this. He's like, listen, girl, I really love you. I want you to come back. I want to make things work. And my mind was clear and I was like, yes, this is going to be it. You know, he wants to make things work. And out of the blue, he says, but you have to know something. I'm like, what? He's like, there's this one girl that was in the factory and her and I started seeing each other. It's like, what? He's like, yeah, you know, she just came over one day. I'm like, wait. How did you have a girl over? A girl doesn't just come over. And he's like, well, you know, my roommate brought her over. I'm like, wait, how does your roommate even know her? Does he work in the same factory? He's like, yes and no. I'm like, no. And then he just breaks down. He took lots of road trips with this girl, and she was Polish origin. So he wanted to experience a white woman, and I was just so dumbfounded. I didn't know whether to slap him, and I just tell him like, get out of my face, go talk to my dad. And then meanwhile, my dad saw I was upset. And then for the first time, my dad actually stood up for me. And he just was like, how dare you tell my daughter you did this? You must be joking. And my dad is the one that's related to him by blood, not my mom. So my dad took even more offense, you know, like this is his nephew. And my dad just said like, you know, I don't want to see you. Like, I don't want to see you until you figure this out, like sort out this stuff, what you've just done and said. And then he, instead of like humbling himself, he looks at my dad and he was like, don't you dare step foot in the same arena I'm in. And I just lost it. I came out running and pushing him, like, how can you say this to my dad? Like, the guy is probably one of the reasons I married you to begin with. And you're disrespecting him? In his house? Like, his aunt was trying to make up for it. His aunt's like, no, he didn't mean, what did he mean? Then a couple of weeks go by and my religious uncle comes over. And instead of bringing his wife, he goes, you know, Beta, this is a moment in your life. You need to tell me what you want. And I was like, you know what? I want it over. I tried making it work. He told me he loves somebody else clearly. You know, like I could forgive it once, but like if he's clearly telling me he loves somebody else, why am I gonna stay in this? And he didn't push, which I was shocked at because my uncle has like a really long beard and it's like white now because of age, but it was like down to his chest and, you know, always wearing a hat on his head, like he's gonna say Jamaat at any moment. And he just like, no, he's like, no, it's okay, you said it's over. But then he went and told my dad, and my dad came running and kicking, and my dad, out of nowhere, just took out his anger on me. Like, he just like hit me on the head so hard, and he's like, how dare you say you want a divorce? I was like, my sister asked for one 2 months ago, you were okay with her. And he was just like, no, because my sister was married to my cousin on my mom's side. So he was fine with that. But for his side, he was like, no, it's crossing the line. So needless to say, I filed for my divorce, but I never served him the papers because a part of me was like, no, I should still try to make this work. I was in Michigan and I was like leaving. I made sure I got a job out of the state. I was the first kid in my family to actually finish my actual college degree, even though I'm the middle child. And then I decided, like, you know what, let me call him one last time. So just like a scene from the movie, I'm like calling him from a bus station, because this is like, I'm getting a job in Jersey, out of all places, and I'm like, I'm gonna leave Michigan. I'm going to take a 10-hour bus ride to Jersey for my new job, and I wanna know if he'll come along. Just drop everything and say, yes, let's make this work. And what he said to me on the phone was, when I told him, like, listen, I'm giving you a chance again, he just says, oh, you know what? The gun's already been fired, bullets don't come back. And I just was like, okay, this is it. You know, it's done. So when you are asked that question, like, you know, if there's one moment in time that you could change, I don't think I would say I would change this moment, because that's what's made me. You know, that's what's helped shape me today. And I never had regrets of what I did, because at that point in time, that's what I really wanted in my life, because that's all that mattered. So thank you guys for your time.